thank you for being here, Charles.
Well, thanks for having me. And after that wonderful introduction, I'm not worthy of it, but I'll do the best I can.
I do want to just take this introduction a little bit further and talk about some things that I want to bring to this. You might know or may not know that I actually teach with some of your books and some of the ideas that you bring forth. And I just wanted to draw out a few things about him. And so Charles was born in Wichita, Kansas, and Liz, his wife, of 44 years, lives with him, and they have two grown children. Now, he has been the chairman and CEO of Koch Industries since 1967. And under his leadership, the company has been transformed into one of the world leading companies. I think what I especially want to focus on is just since January 2009, that's not even 10 years ago, Koch companies have earned more than 1,200 awards for safety, environmental excellence, community stewardship, innovation, customer service, and the kind of brands, because we talk about Koch Industries, but let's bring it down to some of the brands that you actually know. Products that are being produced are things like Stainmaster carpet, Lycra fiber, quilted northern tissue, and Dixie brand of cups, and so on. These are everyday items that you know, but you might not know where they're coming from or who produces them. Now, you have over the years, with your interest in human flourishing, invested in a lot of organizations and universities, including our own, and then started to write in 2 books about good profit and this idea of management that you have. But if we take a step back, where are you coming from with this? Why are you doing this? What's your idea? What brought you to this idea of writing about good profit?
Well, I think part of it was that the philosophy that to whom much is given, much is expected. And I grew up with every advantage, so I didn't know, as a kid, I didn't always have this attitude. By the time I graduated from high school, I'd been to 8 schools. I was only kicked out of 1, though, so it wasn't as bad as it sounds. But when I started in business, I felt a tremendous obligation, a tremendous pressure, no one putting it on me, but putting it on myself that, okay, I've been given all this, and people have put up a lot dealing with me and as I was growing up, because I challenged everything. I wanted to do things differently than anybody else. I wanted to be different. And so I felt an obligation to make a real contribution, to make a difference. And I knew I wasn't smart enough to figure out how to do that by myself. I didn't have the tools to do that. So I had always been a big fan of science, the philosophy of science, and so I internalized Newton's insight. If I see further, it's because I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. So I said, what I've got to do is go find these giants, go find the principles of scientific and social progress, and then figure out how to apply them in my life to enable me to be the best me I can be. And so I started studying everything I could that was relevant, all different subjects, fields, and from all different perspectives to find those. And when I would find a principle, I would apply it in every aspect I could, or find ways to apply it. And that would be in a business, with my family, in my charitable activities, my community activities, and so on. And I'll just, if I could take a minute, just give you one example here. Among the other things I learned early on is why did humanity go along for millennia in which the common person gained almost nothing in quality of life and standard of living up until the 18th century. And then in various parts of the world, this quality of life exploded. So we have what's called the hockey stick. And I discovered in that it was when the common person began to be given equality under the law and social dignity. And that was brought about by a convergence of a number of changes, including the printing press. So what that brought about is the common person, and I'm talking about merchants, traders, artisans, working people. But before that, the aristocrats and the hierarchy, they were the dignified, and people working, well, they were kind of lower and discouraged and disrespected. And so this started to change in various countries at different rates. And it's because this then gave the common person the courage and incentive to better himself. And in the process, he bettered the people around him. And we started getting innovations and progress and more open trade so people could exchange. And so that's the other part I learned, that in a voluntary exchange, people enter into voluntary exchanges because they both believe they will benefit. And so the way I internalized all this, okay, the way to be successful in business is don't focus, first of all, on how do I maximize profit? How do I get more money? It's how do I create value for others? And what capabilities do I need to be? Which customers can I create the most value for? And then in my studies, I read Schumpeter, and I took from Schumpeter his notion his insight that for business people, the ground is constantly crumbling under their feet. And so the way I internalized that, it's not just, okay, we're really good at this and we got customers and we're making good profit and so on. It's that isn't going to last because of what he called creative destruction. Your competitors are improving, other people are innovating. If you just continue to do things the way you've been doing them, no matter how well you're doing them, you're going to be obsolete in not too many years. And of course, we see all that change is accelerating at lightning speed. So we needed to have the attitude, no matter what we're doing in business or each employee, what you're doing today isn't good enough. And what you need to dedicate yourself is to every day think how I'm going to innovate, how I learn, how I improve, how I make my job obsolete so I can have a better job and I can create more value. That's what he called the process of creative destruction. And then, see, these things build on each other. Then I internalized Karl Popper's idea of the scientific method, which is, in his essay, he calls science as falsification. And that is, so the way I internalized that is, okay, any innovation we have, any product, any new initiative, any investment, any strategy, the way we need to address that when we come up with something new, not to defend it and protect it, and anybody who criticizes it should be shut down. The other way, we need, as Popper suggested, to solicit challenges, criticism. Because if we're going to fail, let's fail quickly and inexpensively, rather than launch this thing that has all these flaws in it. So that's what we call the challenge process. And for me and all the leaders at every level in our company, if people aren't challenging you, you are not a good leader. And if you're an employee and you have a better idea or you see a flaw in what's being done and you're not challenged, you're not doing your job. We'll just get another computer. Because computers can do routine things. We expect you to think and challenge. And so all this led to, so not just these, but principle after principle applied in this way, concept after, then them together, and then out of that we finally simplified it and codified it into our 5 dimensions and market-based management, which has turned out to be a toolkit that every employee can use to solve problems and capture opportunities.
You talk about the review process. You have a challenge process, and do you have a review process internally where people see how you're doing?
Right.
Do you get reviewed?
I get reviewed.
How's it going?
Well, these people are challenging me.
Yeah.
We got to stop that.
You see, I think what you're describing, and by the way, we handed out these sheets where you can see the ideas. What strikes me very much, Charles, is that these concepts, these key concepts, spontaneous order, the role of business, voluntary exchange, and then rules of just conduct and everything, they remind me a lot of the U.S., of the United States, of how the U.S. is organized. Is that a coincidence, or is there something to that?
No, this is based, as I said, on trying to understand what has made society successful, and then we try. I mean, obviously, an organization is different than a society, so you just can't literally take the mechanisms. Mm-hmm. So instead, we take, okay, what has made this society successful and improve people's lives, and then how do we modify that and find mechanisms in the organization that will achieve a similar end.
I've had the privilege to come and see the company a few times, and it's a competitive advantage, what you're having had this insight to see how does a good society work together, and then say, now how do we translate this into a business and how we do that. It works very well. If you have invested $1,000 in Koch Industries when you took over, it would be worth over $5 million today. And Claire talked about firms of endearment being 18 times or 16 times the S&P 500. You're 27 times ahead of the S&P 500. It's your competitive advantage. Why are you sharing this?
Yeah, I wondered that myself. No. Okay, forget everything. I mean, and this is one of the great things about this philosophy. If you're dedicated to creating value for others, then, and we find this with our employees who really internalize this. If every day you're thinking about how do I create more value for others, for my customers, for other employees, or my communities, and so on, to advance the business, then you don't forget that when you go home. And this is what we have our people, particularly people who've retired, who have nothing to gain by telling me this. They say, this philosophy transformed my life, not just my business life, but the way I deal with my family, the way I deal in my charitable work with my church. And they talk about how, and these are Catholics that, boy, I've talked to my priest about that, and this is, I mean, they become passionate about it. So it's transformative, and for selfish reasons, if if we want to be successful in business, we have to have a system that allows people to create value for others and to share in those benefits. Otherwise, if none of us are really creating value, if we're all just cronyist, rigging the system, getting the government to set the rules so people can't compete, then who needs us? I mean, why do they need an intermediary? Just let the government go run it all, because they're determining who's profitable.
That's actually at the core of what strikes me when I see what you're doing, is that you're actually motivated to spread the success that you're having in your company to other companies. Let's say other companies here start to accept this methodology, these insights. What do you see the effect on society would be if more companies would pursue good profit, which you say is to actually create value to a customer in a free exchange?
Well, this is why it's threatening, and I think one of the reasons this is revolutionary.
Yeah.
It's what, I mean, we have, to me, one, if not the largest problem in our country, which is contributing to this two-tiered society we have now, and the violence and hatred, and rather than people trying to help each other, people to hurt each other, drag each other down. If business people, and not only business people, if people in the government, in unions, in politics, would really be dedicated to how do I help others improve their lives? And I want to benefit it. I'm not sacrificing myself, but I want to only gain by creating value for others and then sharing in that. And if we had all business, or the majority of business people really doing that, it would transform society. And because, among other things, it would transform the employees, as we've found in our company. And it starts with, all of this starts with personal transformation. Mm-hmm. And with these ideas, and if you practice this, as one of your president of Catholic University, we're both great fans of Michael Polanyi, and this is what he taught. There's a difference between conceptual knowledge and personal knowledge. And personal knowledge is when you can take a concept and it becomes part of yourself. Like a concert violinist doesn't have to think, oh, how do I do the bow, what notes and stuff. She's internalized all the procedures, and the violin becomes an extension of her hand, so she can think of the whole. How do I make beautiful music? And that's when people get these ideas and they become personal knowledge, so they practice them automatically and instinctively. Then you transform yourself, and in the process you transform others. And when enough of us transform ourselves, we transform societies. And if business community alone would do that, we would totally change the trajectory of this country, in my view. And I've seen that firsthand in the things. I mean, we work with ex-cons, with the poorest people in the world, and they pick up these, I've told some of them, they pick up these ideas. I said, you do better than any acquisition we've ever made in picking up eternal ex-cons, ex-gang members. They can tell chapter and verse after a few months the concepts and then how they've applied it to change what they're doing. I mean, I said, well, you teach market-based management better than I do.
It's the difference that I think is palpable, that a lot of companies have company values and they're on the wall there, and the question is, are they in people's hearts? Like, are people actually doing this? That seems to be the most difficult thing to do, to go from concept to internalization. And how do you train your people? How does this happen? First of all, how do you hire? Can you describe a good hire for you?
Sure. Well, we hire first on values, and we have, as you may have seen, we have 10 guiding principles, and many, as you say, many companies have principles. And I've seen for many companies, though, there's something you put on the bulletin board, you put it in the desk drawer, and then you go about your business. Our guiding principles are who we are as a company. Are we perfect? Are we all perfect? Do we always follow them exactly? No. But we find when we don't, we get our heads kicked in. So it keeps bringing us, reinforcing the power of these guiding principles. So we hire first on these principles, and second on talent. Now,
so first character, second talent.
Second talent.
You take
and
character,
not credentials. We don't care what credentials. What we're looking for is the potential of a person.
Yeah.
More than, okay, I got experience in that.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, it's like the NFL recruiting players. They don't necessarily look at their statistics in college, although that's a factor. They look at what is their physical and mental potential and their mental toughness. Yeah. And then the really good coaches who want to build a team, they look at those who are going to put the team first rather than their personal statistics. So we hire first on values, and then we retain on values if people are violating our principles and we can't get them to change, which is very difficult to do, particularly with older people like me, or ancient people like me. And then we promote on these principles, and we reward on them.
Now, as you say, you have had a few years to practice, and you didn't start off after MIT with all these principles right away. Now you see on this side and that side, these are all our students, and they are here to listen and say, what does somebody who has built a company like you have to say to them? They're you when, at 20. Is there specific insights that you learned the hard way that you say, do this? How would you advise your 20-year-old self like they're sitting here?
I would say find how you can create the most value. And one of our concepts that we use is multiple intelligence theory, and I'm an example of that. Growing up as a young kid, I didn't think I was good at anything except getting in trouble. I was very good at that. And then in the third grade, when the teacher was putting math problems on the board, I was asking myself, why is she doing? The answers are obvious. And then I noticed they weren't obvious to any of the other kids. So, hey, I'm good at something. And then later I found that in multiple intelligence theory, there is a particular intelligence called logical mathematical conceptual ability. So I said, okay, I know what I'm going to do. I am going to develop that and find things that I can do that fit in that sphere, because I can do a good job. And as a matter of fact, the way we're organized, we try to organize through the division of labor by comparative advantage, which is a long way of saying build a team with people who are really good at specific things, and their role would be to do what they're really good at, and then they share and work together. So all together, it's not 1 + 1 = 2, or 1 + 1 + 1 = 3, it's equals 10 or 15. So what I would say to any individual growing up, find what your innate abilities are that will enable you to create the most value, and then turn those into skills that others will value, and then use them to help other people improve their lives. And if you do that, you'll be very successful. And I'm not talking about making the most money. I'm talking about having fulfillment, because that's what it's all about. is having a life of meaning, a fulfilling life, human flourish, which starts with yourself. I mean, people say, well, I want to be respected. Well, the number one person that needs to respect you is you. And that's what I mean, people go, doesn't all the criticism? No, if I feel I'm doing the right thing and I listen to the challenges and learn from them, but if I feel I'm doing the right thing, then I feel that's what I'm going to continue to do, no matter what the criticism.
So could we say that the goal of business in that sense is human flourishing? The goal of society is human flourishing. How do you see that interplay between the society at large and the business community? I know I read somewhere that you promote, that you abide, you abide by all these regulations and everything, and you are promoting regulations that would decrease your profit. You're promoting the taking away of regulations that would actually decrease your profit. Is that true?
Right, but no. Our position on every policy, will it help people improve their lives or not? Not would make our short-term profits go up or down, because to me that's suicidal. Long-term, besides not being the right thing to do.
Are there regulations that are good for human flourishing?
Oh yeah, I mean there needs to be. I mean we have and we need to have a system of property rights, but unless property rights are defined in a way that costs and benefits are united, it is not going to work. That is, if I can get the benefits and have you bear the cost by dumping my garbage in your front lawn, then that isn't going to work. So there needs to be rules to defend. I mean, let's go back to the Declaration of Independence, which I keep going back to, and I put for the country that in the same category as I do our guiding principles. It's that everyone is created equal with certain unalienable rights, and governments are instituted to secure those rights. Now you look at to the extent this country has followed those, has made us the most successful country in the history of the world. The extent to which we have violated those have led to every problem we've had and all the problems we have today. I mean, look at it. Equal rights. When that was written, the blacks had no rights. Native Americans had no rights. Women only had partial rights. Certain immigrants only had partial rights. Certain religious groups were discriminated against. There was massive cronyism there, not as much as today, but cronyism, which meant that some groups had more rights than others. So I go back to that, and just as I do in our guiding principles, every time we violated those, it's been a disaster for us.
What do you find the most difficult part of leading? I mean, you've been a leader in your company for now 40 years, 50 years. Do you find leading still difficult? Is that still challenging to you?
Well, as I say, I'm good at a very narrow range of activities, and what's great of me in my position, I get to focus on those, and I get people around me who are good at all the other things that need to be done. But no, the problem in leading, I think the biggest problem in an organization is the agency problem, and that is what will make the organization successful are certain things, and what will make an individual believes will make him or her successful can be quite different. And so the key role in management is how do I get all these agents of the company to understand what they need to do to make the company successful, which are some of the things we've talked about. And then how do I get the incentives to line aligned, so they are really rewarded for making the company better rather than advancing their own interests. I mean, take a basketball team. Somebody who wants to get a lot of points scoring shoots all the time and the team loses. Well, we see that in business everywhere. And so, I mean, I'm not saying we're far from perfect in that, but that's something we are constantly working on.
To put that into the context of the company, do you have specific job descriptions, or how do you deal with this? You know, the classic job description talks about what you have to do and how and everything. How do you compare to that with Good Profit?
Well, we have, if you've read Good Profit, you know, we have roles, responsibilities, and expectations. And the roles and responsibilities, we try to design around a person's innate abilities and their interests and passions. And we find typically when a company designs jobs, then they find somebody who's kind of the best. Everyone's kind of a compromise. So typically somebody has a role and they're good at 70% of it and not 30%. Well, if you have them doing 30% of the things they have no ability to do and no real interest in, it's not going to be done well. So just think, if you can take that 70-30 ratio, or maybe it's 50-50, and get it so they're doing 90% of their responsibility is what they're really good at and have a passion for. Think of the increase in productivity, and think of the increase in fulfillment for an employee. The example I use in talking to employees, I said, let's say I was a business manager for an opera company, and I was doing a pretty good job, and the tenor got sick, so they said, Chuck, you gotta sing opera, you gotta sing tenor. And they could give me training, feedback, till I was a grease spot on the floor. We would go bankrupt. I can't sing a note. But that's what we do to people. And we say, this person's failing, this employee's no good. So the first thing, if that happens, but if they have good values, and we know they have potential, we say, okay, it's our fault. We have you in the wrong role. Let's try you in another one. Sometimes it doesn't work out. So some people are unwilling to admit that they're not good at everything, or they're not good at what they think will elevate their status. And we've had those disasters. These people have ruined their lives.
But when you say we do that, what, the headquarters or something local, or who helps people figure out that? Is that a team-based effort?
We have a large market-based management team that teaches this and consults us, but it's the role of every supervisor at every level. And we find a supervisor at any level, if they're not living by these principles, then the people in that group are not that effective. We have problems. And they think this is all hypocrisy. We hear what, as my wife calls me, Chuck Man just talking about. And we read all this stuff, but that's not the way it's really working here. I mean, it's like your kids. This one thing we really worked at with our kids is we did not preach anything we did not live by, because your kids can spot hypocrisy faster than anybody. And then if you're a big hypocrite, then they'll tend to do the opposite, because this is all phony baloney. Yeah. And so that's what we have. So a supervisor who doesn't do this can't really be a supervisor. And we have that. They're good performers, but they're not good supervisors. So they get them back in a role that they're really
What impresses me, Charles,
in.
is you let me go around in the company and met a lot of people. What I found is that your company is not you have 120,000 employees, right?
Right.
Your company is not one big company. It's like tons of entrepreneurs. And that reflects the culture, I think, of the values. One in particular is you sort of put the money where the mouth is, in that you don't really believe in budgets? Is that right? How does this work? How do you give, for example, spending authority and investment authority into projects? How do you delegate that down into the organization?
Well, once again, this is the division of labor by comparative advantage. It's kind of like a property rights system in a well-functioning market economy. To work, it's people accumulate property by creating value for others. And so they have good profit, and then they have more property. And let's say they're really good at making widgets, and widgets that people really want and creates value for them. So they gain a lot of property to make widgets. And let's say they go into singing opera, and they start losing. They're going to lose their property rights. And so that's what we try to emulate in the company. You're really good at these kind of decisions, and you've proven that, so you get more and more authority to make these. Let's say you're in a trading group, and you're really good at trading strategies, so you'll get more authority on that, but you're not very good on hiring and selecting people for the team or managing them. So you're not going to have authority on that. So once again, it's trying to really practice the division of labor by comparative advantage.
It reminds me of it's a free market, right? It's a free market in your business that people with the good ideas, they end up being able to realize them.
Free market with accountability and responsibility, of course.
One thing I'd like you to just talk about is your opinion of how are we doing as a world, as a market? Do you think we have a free market right now?
No.
Well, how don't we have a free market?
Because it's full of cronyism. You look at all the rules and the protectionism and that are destroying opportunity for the disadvantaged, that are leading to this two-tiered society. For some of us, make a lot of money and others can't get started through regulations like occupational licensure, somebody starting with nothing, that create these huge barriers for them to get started. And then this distorts the whole economy. It distorts price signals, prices and profit and loss. People think of those, okay, those are incentives, but their main function, at least equal, is they're a knowledge mechanism. That is, in a properly functioning economy, prices and profit and loss signal to the entrepreneur what will people value and what are the best use of resources to satisfy those values. And when that gets distorted, then it undermines productivity, undermines a company's ability to create value for others, to help improve people's lives.
I recently read that for the first time a few years ago, we had more small companies dying than small companies being founded. You think that's a sign of this ailment?
Right.
And
well,
where
yeah,
is this
and
going? What should we do about it?
And we see that in big banks because of, in part of it's technology, but part of it is a big part is the regulatory structure. And the big banks, well, some of the leaders have admitted this. Over the last so many decades, the 5 biggest banks have gone from market share of deposits from 16% to over 50%. And thousands of community banks have been driven out of business. And the community banks, these small community, are the ones that would lend a few $100s to somebody getting started. And so this source of capital for somebody getting started is dried up, along with the regulatory structure and in many ways a failing education system is one reason that we're finding such reception with our work with disadvantaged communities. I mean, it is fabulous to see the potential there and the receptivity to these ideas.
You actually have an organization, Young Entrepreneurs, is that right?
Youth entrepreneurs.
Youth entrepreneurs. Can you tell me about that? Because that would sort of go in that direction, wouldn't it?
Yeah, we started this, my wife and I started this in Wichita 26 or so years ago. And this teaches the ideas of principled entrepreneurship in public high schools in sophomore and junior year. And as part of it, we teach these basic principles, and then each of the students writes a business plan. And then the winners get some venture capital to start, and then we get a local entrepreneur to mentor them and hire them part-time. And I mean, talk about transforming lives. I've seen so many of these kids. I mean, at the graduation, those telling their stories, it brings tears to your eyes. I remember years ago, this girl was telling how she grew up in a tough family, no father, her mother was on drugs, dirt poor, violence everywhere. And so in high school, she was flunking everything. She saw no hope. She'd given up. And then she heard about this course that, gosh, maybe you can get some money. So she got in there and she realized, and this is her telling the story at graduation because she was one of the winners. She said, wow, I learned, if I want to get this money, I've got to prepare a business plan and then present it. So I've got to learn to write and speak. And then if I have a business, I've got to know what's working and not, so I've got to learn math. And then if I want to have customers, I got to start treating people with respect. And she said, I went from flunking everything to getting straight A's. And she got a scholarship and went off to college. I've lost track of her since that, but we have stories after stories like that of the power of these ideas. And to me, everybody who's failing, there are two sets of reasons. One is they have internal obstacles and they have external obstacles. And the way to overcome these internal obstacles that we found, I mean, everybody's different, but it's change the mindset. Everybody has virtually everybody, unless they're infirm, has the ability to learn, contribute, and succeed if they're given the freedom, opportunity, and dignity to do so. So that's the starting point. And then the second is, I say, learn what innate abilities that will enable you to develop a valued skill. And then the third one is apply that to create value for others. And then the external obstacles are getting rid of all these societal barriers that we've been talking about. Education system, the cronyism, the regulations such as occupational licensure, yeah. and so on.
Now, most of the attendees here are business owners. Some large businesses, a lot of smaller and medium-sized businesses. And so we've talked about good profit this whole week, and we were actually inspired by your book. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And so we're all reading this. So I am a small business owner, medium-sized business owner. This may seem a little overwhelming. Like, it took you a while to apply this, right?
Oh yeah, we had we had so many failures. We misapplied it every way you could imagine.
So give us a cue of how do we start? Where do we? You have the 5 dimensions, as you can see in the MBM, the 5 dimensions. Where do we start? And how do we start? Let's go. I go back home on Monday into my company, and I want to change.
Okay. Well, the first thing is, what capabilities do I have that somebody's going to value and is going to pay me
He's
for?
talking about capabilities. He's not talking about industry. This is the thing I need you to clarify.
Right.
You're not interested in industries.
No, I give you we have, and once again, from as I kind of told the story, one of the sets of ideas that got me in this, that you've got to figure out what others are going to value, and there parts of every industry is made up of a whole lot of sets of capabilities. I mean, it's like, let's say you're People say you're in the oil industry and you have a refinery. Well, why? It always puzzled me. Oh, you're in the oil industry, so why aren't you in exploration? Why aren't you having service stations? Why don't you run pipelines? No, I've got a refinery here. We've got a bunch of chemical engineers, and we know how to process oil and make valued products and protect the environment and do all that stuff. So to me, it was, well, why should we be doing these other things? What else can use our capabilities? Well, how about making chemicals? How about making polymers? How about making fibers? How about doing pulp and paper? How about making steel? How about making glass? Guess what? We do all those things now because of that mindset, and then every time we do that, we think, okay, now we're doing something different. What additional capabilities do we need? How do we improve our capabilities?
Mm-hmm. So we go home, we look at our capabilities. Now I also want to bring the values into my company. One of the things you say I love is how you model this to your kids, and you're doing that at work. Like you say, look, I can't be a hypocrite. I have to do it. I have to live it in order for them to believe it. So we probably that's a second step to start this ourselves.
Well, let me go back a second. We've had, and when I put on seminars of the company, I have people, first line supervisors and others would say, okay, we have a lot of procedures now at Koch to try to implement these concepts, but they say, unless, and this is going back to Polanyi, unless I understand the underlying principles, I'm going to get off track. Because this isn't a question, okay, I'm going to memorize this and I got checklists on whether we're doing. It's whether you really understand the spirit of it and what you're trying to achieve. Like we have various things on incentives to motivate. Our goal is to motivate every employee to want to create to maximize long-term value of Koch Industries, not make more money this quarter or stuff, the long-term value by creating value for others. Now, so if we've misapplied this in many ways. Matter of fact, my first real application back in the 60s was to do this in a getting incentives wrong. Is I said, okay, we had a small shop then with about 60 workers. I knew everybody, and I said, God, we're paying them by the hour. We want them to pay them by the value they create. And so I devised this formula on how we're going to pay them by the value. I rolled this out, and they were horrified. So they got a union organizer to come in and organize them. And I went around, God, we're all pals. We're in this together. This will make you better. You'll make more money. They said, you don't understand. We won't know how much we're making. And we got bills to pay. We got families to take care of. More important to us than how much we make is we know what it is so we can plan for it. I said, my bad. Okay, I had one part. This is why all these things need to work in an integrated way. I said, okay, I forgot about something called subjective value. Everybody's values or scales are different. And if assurance of the income is more important than the amount of money, then that's our starting point. I said, okay, would it be okay, though, if we went back to hourly pay, but if somebody did something really great, we paid them an extra bonus? Yeah, that'd be great. So union went away. See how easy this stuff is? But it's only easy after you've made about 500,000 mistakes and apply it, because this is trial and error. Yeah. And with every group, exactly how to apply it in a way that is going to create fulfillment among your employees who then want to do the right thing.
I think that's a great way to finish our interview. Thank you so much for your time with us. And I think you all enjoyed this. Let's show our appreciation.
Thank you. Thank you. you.
Thank you, Tom. Just wait 1 minute with us. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Father, if you don't mind, would you give us tell us what you heard?
Should I go in this direction here?
Yes.
Very good.
I'll,
you
this
move the
direction.
podium
right
on me,
there. Yeah,
huh?
move the podium on here. Here we go.
Never do that to a blind guy.
I won't do it again.
Just kidding. No, honestly, I can't see, but I can feel things that are going on beyond just merely the words that are being used. Of course, I heard the words being used by Charles Koch. That idea of creating value for others as a paramount principle of good profit. I love that. I certainly loved hearing that principle of integrity and values before talent, and of course the subjective definition of that value, the appreciation of letting the other define the value. I think that is wisdom. I think it is definitely good profit. I think that idea of constant challenging, I think it is a terrific principle. In fact, I couldn't believe when he's bringing up Polanyi and Schumpeter and Popper, I'm thinking, this guy is reading everybody I read. I mean, it's just really, truly, but it's right on the marker. The idea of falsification, continuous challenging, is the only way to maintain a standard of creativity that will now enable you to be competitive in the long term. I love the two correctives, too, of Milton Friedman. Maximizing shareholder wealth for Friedman was it, and he pointed out right away it's not shareholder wealth. It's shareholder wealth plus all the other stakeholders, our customers, our employees, and of course, our investors, our society, what we've heard all along. And more than that, it's long-term value. It's not just what's going to come next week and playing to the short term, manipulating statistics. These are kinds of things that I think are not only good profit, but good sense, guarantee that we're going to be creating value for others for a long, long time to come. But what I also felt, unable to see the actions going on, hearing in his voice his humility. I really thought it's genuine. There's not arrogance here. His first words out of his mouth are, I don't think I'm really worthy of that introduction. And it just got better from there. I thought the second thing I could sense, as he was kind of moving through all of these things, was his own ability to critique himself. He's put into practice immediately his own self-challenging mechanism. And I loved it. I was just listening, because as he's going through these things, he's actually, almost correcting himself and seeing another angle that he could actually apply to this situation. And I think, again, it's another principle of humility. But I can tell that he has remarkable values. I can tell the integrity principle is there. And I think what Tim says is right. He's a closet Catholic, and he's really taught us a lot about good practice.